guest. Dr. Lobsang Sangay is the first Sikyong, former president of the Tibetan government in exile. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Sangay. I want to ask you, how do you see this Chinese expansionism, whether it's in Ladakh, whether it's in Arunachal, whether it's along Sikkim borders? Do you believe that the Chinese are determinedly working to some kind of a plan? And more importantly, can they ever be trusted?
Rajibji, thank you for having me on your show. And we have been saying for the last 60 years that in 1950s, when Tibet was occupied, Chinese leaders have said, including Mao Zedong, that Tibet is the palm we have to occupy. Thereafter, we have to go after 5 fingers. And that's Ladakh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. So from Doklam to Galwan to now in Yangtze, in Arunachal Pradesh, what you see is the expansionist design of the Chinese government in the work for the last 60 years. Now, why Tawang? Tawang has one of the most important monastery. 6th Dalai Lama was born in Tawang, and China calls it South Tibet. And then, they want to include as part of China. And in 1914, similar convention, British India and Tibet signed an agreement whereby we agreed that McMahon Line should be the demarcation of the border and Tawang be part of India. Unfortunately, after India regained its independence, Indian government is yet to recognize formally similar convention and McMahon Line as the legally demarcated border. And also including news media, all of you keep saying the border is between China and India. There was never a land border between China and India. It was always between Tibet and India, because the government and the media and the intellectuals call it border between China and India. The Chinese military are saying, okay, if this is our border, we are right here now in Tawang, near Tawang, to Yangtze, to Doklam, to Galwan. So this is an ongoing expansionist design of the Chinese government, cooperated or encouraged by Indian media and Indian intellectuals and Indian government as well. So it's an ongoing issue, and we have to take the Chinese government's word seriously.
I want to just stop you for a moment. I want to just stop you for a moment, Mr. Sangay, because very interestingly today, the Arunachal Chief Minister, Mr. Khandu, has made it very clear that he doesn't see this as a Sino-Indian border face-off, but this is an Indian-Tibet border intrusion by the Chinese. So he seems to be reflecting your viewpoint that do not treat this, the Chinese are aggressors who are seeking to occupy area that does not belong to them.
Absolutely. Pema Khandu is a good friend of mine, and he has been saying this, for a long time. He says since, his father and grandparents have been born and brought up in Arunachal Pradesh, it traditionally used to be called Mengyul for Tawang area and Dukyul for Bhutan and Pöyul for Tibet. So that's how he knew. And he always used to say, and still writes to government authorities, saying, it's a border between Tibet and India. If you recognize that border as a Tibetan border, then India has a claim going all the way back to a similar convention of 1914. Otherwise, Arunachal Pradesh is a high priority for the Chinese government. Number one, in July 2022, Xi Jinping, the president of China, landed in Kongpo area. That's 50 kilometers away from Arunachal Pradesh, before he went to Lhasa, the capital city of Tibet. Then in 2019 of July, Premier Li Kai-ching, Chinese Premier Li Kai-ching, went to Kongpo, which is 50 kilometers away. Now, on the other side of Arunachal Pradesh, or Tawang, China has military town, military airfield, where 500,000 people land in that airport every year. And they have connected a high-speed railway line from Lhasa to Kongpo, just 50 kilometers away from Tawang. So all this infrastructure development, railway line, highway, 4-lane highway, airfield, and military airfield. Now with this railway connection, it will take only 13 hours to connect Lhasa to Chengdu, which is one of the 4 largest military region or division of China. So if there is a breakout of war, God forbid, we don't want it, but if it happens, Chinese government is so confident the infrastructure-wise, supply chains-wise, they are much better prepared than India. And in 1962 war, in fact, yes, Chinese army moved all the way to Tezpur of Assam. So given that past history and confidence and infrastructure development on the Chinese side, they think they're better prepared. That's why they're targeting Arunachal Pradesh. Yes,
how do you respond? How do you respond
to chicken neck?
How do you respond, though, to the Chinese who claim they have historical cultural ties that in a way bind them to the people of Arunachal Pradesh, which they wish to rename in any case?
That's why 1914 Simla Convention is very important. Between British India and Prime Minister of Tibet at that time, Lungje Shatra, came to Simla and negotiated and demarcated the border, McMahon Line, which includes Tawang as part of India. Now, Indian government has to recognize that as a legitimate agreement between Tibet and British India, and hence Tawang becomes part of India. Till you formally recognize that, Chinese will keep saying, Tawang is part of Tibet, it's South Tibet. So, in fact, Tibet is an occupied territory. They refuse to acknowledge that. Now they're saying Tawang is also part of South Tibet.
So how would you respond, given the fact that we are now hearing that post Galwan there have been several such instances? One of those of 2021 we are showing on the screen at the moment, that this is not the only one where there have been these attempted Chinese intrusions. How would the Tibetan people, the government in exile, like to see India respond?
Yes, I think India needs to build military infrastructure all along this Himalayan region for sure. Not for offensive purposes, but for defensive purposes. Expansion is designed coming after 5 fingers from Chinese side is clear. They will come and they will do salami slice or do kadam aage, ek kadam piche, keeps moving in, keeps taking Indian territory. So infrastructure needs to be built up from Arunachal Pradesh all the way to Ladakh, and most importantly, in Arunachal Pradesh, because that's where Chinese government feels very, 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 very bold. And also now, India has just taken over the chairmanship of UN Security Council.
Of G20.
G20's chairmanship has been taken over. All this needs to be raised because ultimately, it is declared by 2049, China wants to be number one, or the superpower in the whole world. To do that, you must be the hegemon or dominant power of the region. That's Asia. And then when China looks around, who can be a potential challengers? It's India, maybe Japan, and maybe Indonesia. Other than that, they don't have many challengers in Asia as such. To assert their dominance first in the region of Asia, they must flex their muscle, and they're doing it with India, including in Doklam and, Galwan, and now in Arunachal Pradesh.
One final question, Mr. Sangay. Do you believe that these attempted ingressions in Arunachal Pradesh are primarily at the moment targeted in capturing space in and around Arunachal Pradesh, or is it aimed at trying to get India to the negotiating table, concede more possibly of Chinese demands in Ladakh and other areas? What do you believe is the ultimate Chinese objective here?
No, I think they have been shifting, right? They say, well, if you concede Aksai Chin, we might consider the Eastern Division or the Arunachal Pradesh. That was in 50s when Chow Enlai said that. And Chow Enlai was a very smooth talker, and he convinced Pandit Nehru at that time, but there was nothing much in written agreement per se. But then since 1985, they've been changing and saying, okay, Aksai Chin is ours, but also in the Eastern Division, Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang is an indispensable part of China. That is their condition, right? So clearly, China is not in a mood to give some, take some. They want all the 5 fingers because to dominate South Asia, you need to control whole of Himalayan region. So that is their ultimate goal.
Right.
So unless, India and the neighboring countries beef up their security, unfortunately, Chinese government will take over this territory. This is what we have learned also. Tibet, you asked whether China can be trusted.
Right.
For initially, from 1949 onwards, we thought China is coming to help us. They did say, we will build road, help you bring development and progress in Tibet. We help built that road, then one road brought more tanks, trucks, guns, and occupied our country. And that one road has now become 100 roads, all leading to our mineral resources, uranium, you just name it, copper, gold. And the Gongbo Zomda area has the largest copper mining in China. Lithium, 70% of lithium of China comes from Tibet, right? So
Right.
lithium is so important for any gadgets, for any battery that we talk about, and it comes from Tibet. And also, Arunachal Pradesh and Northeast and Bangladesh are dependent on Brahmaputra River. Again,
And-
it flows from Tibet. And China is trying to build a major dam to divert river, Brahmaputra River towards China. That's what it is being, reported. So this is vital. And India has to put its pressure regionally, internationally, and build infrastructure locally. That's the only way to defend India.
Let me leave it at that, Mr. Sangay. You've joined me and given us your perspective, which is, of course, one which must be taken very seriously since you've studied the issue over the years and you and your people have been at the heart of this Chinese expansionism. So thank you very much.
Rajiv,
yes.
let me one important point.
Yes.
Because 6th Dalai Lama was born in Tawang area.
That's right.
Recently, Global Times, as recently as October of 2022, they have said all the Dalai Lamas were born inside China, hence the new Dalai Lama or the next Dalai Lama cannot be born outside of China. Now, 4th Dalai Lama was born in Mongolia, but it's part of Inner Mongolia, which is occupied by China at the moment. Only, a region which is outside of China at the moment is Tawang. So to occupy Tawang, is to say, okay, Dalai Lama was born there. It is part of China, occupied Tibet. And then now the 15th Dalai Lama cannot be born outside of China.
So
this is the narrative they're trying
so
to
it's
build.
effectively
In that
meant-
narrative,
It's
Tawang is
effectively
very, very
meant to
important.
undermine your religious and cultural legacy as well, in a way, by trying to claim to Tawang. I appreciate you joining us, Dr. Sangay. Thank you very much for that unique perspective that you've given me there tonight, right at the top of the show.